Hello and welcome to the AICPA Trusted Professional Podcast, provided by the New York State Society of Certified Public Accountants. I'm Calvin Harris Jr., a CPA and Chief Executive Officer of the Society, and I'm your host. This is a podcast provided by AICPA where I interview leaders in the accounting profession in New York and beyond, as well as those who influence this space. We help you connect, learn, and lead within the accounting profession. In this episode, we present an interview with a special guest, our very first CPA outside of the state of New York. That's Carla McCall, CPA, Chair of the AICPA. But before we get to Carla, let's discuss the news of the day. First, I certainly want to highlight the work of our 14 chapters around the state and 60 plus communities of practice and committees who are all doing amazing events and work in the local areas and cities throughout our state. At the time of this recording, we have exciting events happening within our upstate and downstate areas. I want to highlight two events specifically, and that would be our Rockland chapter having a professional networking event on Wednesday, October the 16th, as well as our Mid-Hudson chapter having a bankers, attorneys, and CPA networking event on Thursday, October 24th. Those and many other events happening throughout the state with our society can be found on the events page at nysscpa.org. Now, I want to also look within the profession as a whole, and the biggest news by far at the time of recording are two items that have been proposed by the AICPA and NASBA jointly. Admittedly, this is possibly the biggest news item in decades. And I want to refer to the NASBA website where you can get this information, as well as AICPA. As noted on the NASBA website, as part of efforts to address accounting talent needs and expand access to accounting careers to more candidates, the American Institute of CPAs, or AICPA, and the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, NASBA, have proposed changes to the profession's model law. The Uniform Accountancy Act, or UAA, provides state legislatures and state boards of accountancy with a national model that can be adopted in full or partially adapted to meet the needs of each jurisdiction. The proposed changes to UAA would enable potential adoption by states of the CPA competency-based experience pathway, an additional path to CPA licensure proposed by the AICPA and NASBA. The competency-based experience pathway would allow CPA candidates to demonstrate their professional and technical skills in the workplace after earning a bachelor's degree and meeting their state's requirements for accounting and business courses. The AICPA and NASBA released an exposure draft outlining the proposed pathway on September the 12th. That comment period is open through December the 6th of this year. Also, to facilitate state adoption of the CPA competency-based experience pathway, the AICPA and NASBA boards of directors each approved exposure changes to the UAA that would set the accounting required to sit for the uniform CPA examination at a baccalaureate degree or higher, define the requirements for an additional pathway for licensure as a CPA, maintain mobility for those licensed under a pathway defined in the UAA, facilitate a means to allow state boards of accountancy to identify those licensed under a pathway that is not substantially equivalent to the UAA through a national licensee database, and provide a mechanism for those who are licensed under a pathway that is not defined in the UAA, but who later meet the mobility requirements defined in the UAA. Separately, the NASBA Board of Directors approved for exposure UAA model rule changes, updating the definitions to reflect the additional pathway for licensure and the experience required for the issuance of an initial certificate under the proposed additional pathway. The AICPA and NASBA are seeking input on the proposed changes through a comment period that will remain open until December 30th. Comments can be sent to UAA exposure draft comments. Now, in this case, I read almost verbatim from the NASBA website because I wanted to make sure that we're providing a full picture on what's happening. As I said, changes to UAA and model language is something that is transformative in nature for the profession. This is something that has not been in this level of discussion for decades. So I want to make sure that we emphasize this. Now, there's a lot of discussion to be had on this, a lot of review to occur. I can assure you that New York will absolutely be making its voice heard on both competency pathway proposed, which has a December 6th deadline date, as well as UAA, which have a December 30th comment period. We are working on mechanisms to make sure that members and colleagues and stakeholders of NYCPA have an opportunity to comment, because we certainly want to make sure that we have a comprehensive response to those items. As I mentioned, you can see information on these items on the NASBA website, where I've essentially read directly from the website, also on the AICPA. And you can also receive that information through the NYSSCPA website. Now, what's my take on these items? I think at a time when the profession is clearly having challenges maintaining our numbers, just when we talk about pipeline, we know we have a challenge of getting younger people interested in the profession and staying in the profession. But the pipeline also includes those who are in accounting already, who may not find it as fulfilling as so many of us do. So this is an area that is of critical importance to make sure we determine what is the best way and ideal ways for people to come across the profession, to come into the profession and ideally become a CPA. And lastly, it is worth noting that while these items jointly came through AICPA and NASBA, licensure is still determined by 55 states and jurisdictions, including New York State. So for that reason, among us, you can absolutely look forward to comment coming from New York. And this is something that we will certainly talk about considerably more in the near future. One additional story I did want to put out there for information is one that comes to us via the Financial Times, and that is the private equity roll-ups of accounting firms could run into trouble. Spurred by job seekers, the accounting profession has an image problem. We just talked about it a little earlier, but has never been so fashionable with investors. Private equity is tipped to own as many as 10 of the 30 largest accounting firms and might soon be funding international expansion. Grant Thornton's private equity-backed U.S. business is one of the potential bidders for its UK and Irish affiliates. It's not hard to see where this could go. Accounting firms provide a flow of resilient, stable audit revenues, along with the scope to consolidate a fragmented market. If private equity can cross-border deals, it could accelerate growth by making it easier to serve high-paying international clients. All of that information, of course, comes to us via Financial Times. So in terms of my take, this is an area that has constantly been in the news in terms of the transactions and mergers and acquisitions and the effect of private equity. Time still will tell over the long haul where the benefits are for firms. But I can tell you, if my inbox is any indication from what I keep hearing from firm leaders, this is an area that will be in constant discussion. So please continue to stay engaged on this, as private equity is clearly here within the profession. And now it's going to be incumbent upon us to make sure that as those investment opportunities continue, that while we continue to serve the public trust, we also structure and set up our accounting firms and obviously the employees that work within them for long-term success. So those would end our two news
All right,
items.
Joining me now on
episode.
the Trust Professional Podcast is Carla McCall.
Let's go to Carla McCall,
chair of the AICPA. She is the managing partner of AAFCPAs and newish chair of the association. She also serves as co-chair of the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants, combining the strengths of the AICPA and the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants. We are very, very excited to have Carla joining me today. So Carla, thank you so much and glad to have you here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Calvin. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you again. So side note, Carla ends up being the first non-New York CPA, unless there's something I missed in your background. You're the first non-New York CPA we've had on the podcast so far.
Woo-hoo! So I love it.
All right, so we're branching out, but when we branch out, we're branching out really big. So we're bringing in the big guns.
Yeah.
So we're bringing in Carla herself, but I want to jump right into it in terms of you walking me through, however you want, what was your journey into the field of accounting?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Calvin. I have thrown myself into periods of self-reflection over the years and thinking about that very question. Because I think when you're in the moment, you're not really thinking about it, right? I grew up in a family that had a significant business influence. My grandmother started an insurance agency in 1948 after spending some time in banking. And so I've had that sort of influence around business and small business. My entire family worked in that insurance agency. I had an accounting course in high school. I'm not sure that was the driver for me, the course itself, though I did well in it. I had a friend who was a couple of years older than me and ended up going to college to study accounting. And he came back and said, you have to study accounting because you can make a lot of money.
Oh, wow. Who was this friend? Do they have a name? Or should we
no.
keep them quiet? I was like, we need to thank that person and send them around the country.
He may or may not have been my first husband.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe he doesn't tour yet then.
Well, which is funny because now we're talking about raising starting salaries for pipeline and things. And I think there's a lot of synergies there because that was a driver for me as a young person going to school. However, that being said, I ended up going to Bentley University. I studied accounting and I went to work for a small firm in West Hartford. So I spent my entire career in public, but the managing partner in that firm, his name was Tom Filomeno. He took over from his dad. I don't know, we were maybe 20 to 30 people, if that, but he was an innovator. He was always at the cutting edge of innovation. He allowed us to have client contact from a very early and young point in our career. And that's what made me realize that we're in a relationship business. It is creating those relationships and building that rapport with our clients. And that's what I fell in love with public accounting, that and the diversity of the work. So I really fell in love with public. When I moved to Massachusetts, I ended up working for AAFCPAs, and I am grateful I chose this firm because they've allowed me to lead and create along my journey, which has ultimately led me to a seat as chair of the AICPA.
So now I would think in your role as chair, you've seen a lot as well, and you get to see a lot. So what do you see as our biggest challenge? Easy question. Our biggest challenge as a profession. What do you see from your seat?
Yeah, thanks for starting out easy, Calvin. So for me, the biggest challenge for us in our profession is change management. Between the new world of work and human capital expectations and advancement of technology, proliferation of AI and business model evolution, that's a lot for us to manage. And so we need to be really good at change management within our teams because we're trying to tackle a lot of issues all at the same time. So that's sort of where my head is on challenges.
That makes a lot of sense. And around us within the profession and various folks involved in the profession, that things are happening so quickly. I told my team here and actually a few other members recently, I feel like we're in like a 20-year period where these sort of changes, staffing-wise, only happen like every 20 years. So I'm sure it's an interesting and fun time for someone in your role. So this ends up being interesting. Next question for you as well in terms of, when you think of accounting, or you could even think beyond that, what do you think there ends up being something that just a lot of people get wrong? I'll take one off the table because this one always comes up first.
Okay.
It's not about us, all of us CPAs doing taxes. So beyond that one, that we all do taxes, what is something about us that people consistently get wrong?
Well, I guess it varies for me whether you're talking outside the profession or inside the profession. Outside the profession, for me, I especially with the youngest generation, as we're talking about attracting talent, is they have a dated view about what we do. They think we do math. I haven't heard the taxes one though. Though as a CPA, you will always get a tax question. So if you have, because they just think we know it all, right? So if you have an opportunity to do a rotation in tax, like I started my career in tax, extremely helpful as a CPA. But I think that's really what it is just a dated view about what we do when we're really helping clients improve their businesses and their lives and solving complex problems. And we do so much more. And I don't know that we highlight that enough as a profession and as individuals, quite frankly.
That's such a true statement. And it's interesting you say about the dated view. And that doesn't come up as much as it should, but as you say that makes perfect sense because it happens at least once a week. It certainly happened last week where I'll see some article, I suspect you see the same ones, where someone talks about bringing this excitement into accounting or how the young people are interested there, or the most recent one talked about bringing the sexy back to accounting. That was the title. It's not, it's not my own words.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I read that article and I was like, you know what? I couldn't disagree with much of it. I think a lot of their points were valid. And I was like, okay, this must be like a clickbait title. And I fell right into it. I clicked immediately. But it does come up a lot. Are we making sure that younger people know some of the interesting things that we can do? Because otherwise, if we don't tell our story, who will?
Yeah. They could have had a sexier cover picture, I will say.
You saw that too. I was thinking, I was like, all right, so for those of you who haven't seen the article, and we can give attribution a little later on this, but the picture I saw had let's say an older gentleman with, he technically had more hair than I did, but that's only because the hair surrounded his ears. And he was on a pedestal, and there were these young, excited looking people looking up at him, and he was a stone. He was a literal statue. So it was like, well, I don't want to be in that profession either, if that's what it looks like. But yeah.
Some marketing around that.
All right. Well, I want to ask you a few other things, but this one I think will be interesting just given your role. It's like, we're going to make you Queen Carla.
Yeah.
For this thought experiment. You are in total control. So if you had unlimited resources, no constraints, and you can go beyond the profession. It actually might be as interesting as anything else. But if we're talking about the accounting profession, what would you do if you had? Now we're talking about darn near omnipotence.
Sure.
I mean, as chair of AICPA, you're this close to that already. But we're saying like movie theater style omnipotent.
Well, it's funny. My partners are laughing right now because my nickname in my firm for years and years is Queen Bee. So, technically, but in any case, yeah, if I had unlimited resources, what I would do is I would create an integrated tech stack for firms that had AI and automation built in, allows us to track profit per person based on output, manage productivity of our people real time, was flexible enough to use in any practice area, and allows us to ditch the billable hour. That's what I would create. Wow,
that's fantastic. I feel like that's something that somebody's got to be working on. That is such a great idea.
Well, it's interesting because we have in our vision plan, our evolution is to not have reliance on an input like the billable hour, which is you have good hours, you have bad hours, efficient hours, inefficient hours. It is not a driver of profit or value that someone brings to the firm. Yet all of our metrics and KPIs are based on this. And so, but what I found is that there's almost too many tech companies that are trying to serve our profession, and they're isolated in one area. And once they have something, and some of the legacy providers don't play well in the sandbox with anybody else. And it's super frustrating. And having a CIO in our firm who didn't come from our industry, and when he first joined us, he's like, Carla, there is no tech stack like an accounting firm tech stack. This is nuts. Because you have to manage all those nuances of how you can connect them, and they don't connect with each other, so we have to create an API. Can we get an API? Can we get access? And all of those things that allow us to manage our businesses in a smarter way. Is it coming? Maybe. I haven't seen it yet.
That's a good one. And it's interesting. Your point on billable and billing and billable hours is so on point. I got to say, I've yet to meet the person who gives a really compelling argument for why they want to keep billable hours as their driver. Beyond, of course, we've used it forever, but.
Yeah, I mean, the only one I've heard, which is valid, but we're working on that, is you have to have a really strong muscle in our profession, especially in public, of determining when you're out of scope.
That's fair.
Because scope creep is real. It happens. And we use the billable hour as a crutch to be able to recognize it, bill it, and, price it to some degree, right? So.
Right. No, that's fair. I could see that. When I think back to, and it was years ago, but when I think back to when I was consulting, I was never able to get anyone comfortable, and this might have been more of Calvin not being good at smart. I was never able to get anybody comfortable with billable hours. But let me take the same number and kind of back into, and kind of get my way into a flat number based on what I expect the hours and what I wanted. there would be so little pushback on that once they understood the value that you were creating. The end result is the same, and you've taken on the risk as the CPA. If you can't deliver, or heaven forbid, you have scope creep, you're going to have problems. But I always struggled with billable hours whenever I tried. So
yeah, there is a little bit of a drudgery of every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes. I don't know. Every firm does it differently. Of the newest generation is saying this, really? Like there has to be a better way than having to manage every moment of your time, I guess. But I know we can solve that issue. And now that firms are hiring people from outside the profession, right? Who worked. Yeah. We have outsourced practices that they've been CFOs and companies. They're not managing their time. Now they come into a firm. Sometimes they're saddled with tracking that, or technologists, or you name it, right? And so again, that's another reason why we should try and develop smarter KPIs that cover the areas that I talked about, which is productivity and utilization and all those things that are really important for us to be successful.
Great. That's a very good point. Excellent point, actually. So I wanted to take one pivot question I forgot to ask you, but it's an easy one.
Okay.
All right. So this ends up being a running joke within NYCPA, because apparently Ben Affleck cannot be the answer to this question. But who would be your favorite fictional accountant?
Favorite fictional accountant?
Yeah. I mean, we've got all sorts of media. You've got books, you've got movies. Ben Affleck came up many times, often from my own mouth. So I was told I cannot, although I just did. I can't invoke Ben Affleck's name. A lot of people don't want to invoke his name these days, but definitely not as related to their favorite accountant. So
anybody, doesn't have to be
Oh, hey, I mean, it's your show. You can go wherever you want with this.
Well, I mean, it would have to be someone who's well-known and impactful and people remember. Someone like a Bradley Cooper, or...
I'll take Bradley Cooper, actually. So, I can think Bradley Cooper's been...
I don't know. You see where I'm going with this?
I do. I see where this is going, and yeah, well... I guess that's still better than Ben Affleck, but all right, we've got a few. You've got a few to choose from. I will.
Well, there are famous people already that are accountants and CPAs. I saw two professional athletes in Puerto Rico on my recent visit that are CPAs.
Really?
Like Felipe Crespi was one. He was a professional baseball player. The second one was a professional basketball player. They spoke to students about their professional athlete lives and then why they chose to study accounting, how it was the best decision, how they related that background for business, no matter what you want to do. I think Felipe runs his own firm now. And he said it was the best decision he's ever made. And when you're a professional athlete, you need to understand your contract, your earning, investments. Like there's all things that it helps you with. So I thought that was a great message.
It is, actually. I can't help but wonder. I've certainly seen examples of athletes, former athletes that become entrepreneurs, and they own a car dealership or a consulting firm. I got to say, I don't know too many that became CPAs. I need to check on that.
Yeah,
okay.
I think there's a list of them. But anyways, yeah.
Well, that's better than real life. I mean, that's better than fictional life. Then those are. Yeah. Or real CPAs.
Right.
All right. Well, Carla, I really appreciate your time today. It's painless talking with us today. But I did want to ask, was there, what question did I miss? Was there anything that I should have asked you, whether about your background or things that are exciting you or interesting to you? What items should we have talked about that I somehow missed?
Yeah, I mean, one question is why I love this profession so much. I've dedicated quite a bit of my professional career to giving back to the profession, both at a state and now a national and global level. And I talk to the students about this. I fell in love with the diversity of the work, constant learning environment. You need intellectual curiosity, the relationship focus. When I was interviewing out of school and when I was moving from Connecticut to Massachusetts and talking to firms, they said, what's your strength? My strength was always in building relationships. I called them interpersonal skills, right? That's where my strength was. I didn't realize how important that was going to be back then than I do today. because you're building trust. We're in a trust relationship. And in order to build trust, you need to build rapport. And if you have both of those, you'll have influence. And that's really helped me on my journey. And the flexibility we have in the profession. Not everybody realizes how much flexibility we have and financial freedom. I'm living a very different life than my parents did because of the profession and what it's given me. And so I think all of those things we need to just talk about more. And that's why I love this profession and what I do.
Well said. Well said. I could not agree more, particularly on the people skills. I think I've said this before. There were classes I was forced to take in college on speech and public speaking, and darn near every class included a presentation. And the college student, Calvin, thought it was an absolute waste of time that we were being required to speak in public so much. That the much older version of Calvin realized that some of the most important things I learned in college, albeit, with a bit of protest, were all those people-facing public speaking and interactions, teamwork sort of things that I thought, mistake, that as an accountant, I would be able to just sit in the corner, do my work, and be left alone.
Yeah.
And I guess that does still exist, but go figure.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I'd add to the list of just meeting just incredible people around the profession, like yourself.
Oh.
And you make me laugh with all your fun T-shirts and everything. And so, people are incredible and they become like family. And that's just been so gratifying.
Very true. Well, on that note, I can't think of a better way to end. Thank you again, Carla, for joining us. Again, this is Carla McCall, Chair of the AICPA, joining us today on the Trusted Professional Podcast.
Thanks, Calvin. Nice to see you. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed our discussion with Carla. As you no doubt noticed, beyond her career, she has an amazing story and an amazing amount of energy for the accounting profession. I can tell you from personal experience, you will be hard-pressed to find someone more committed to the accounting profession and making it as relevant and exciting as possible. Thanks again for joining us on the Trust Professional Podcast. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe now to get this podcast delivered to you when it's released. And of course, please do rate and review our podcast as it helps us continue bringing episodes to you. Lastly, if you aren't a current member of MYCPA, I ask you to join us and learn about our amazing events and activities throughout the state at mysscpa.org and follow us on social media. If you have questions, comments, or suggestions, especially for a possible interviewee, please email us at podcast@mysscpa.org. Thanks for listening.